BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. In this episode, I will be responding to Ray Grant's Zodiac Killer video series, discussing the Sandy Betts story, and looking at a new set of psychological techniques when it comes to evaluating the Zodiac Killer. But first, I would like to say, today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. And to those of you who follow true crime cases outside of the Zodiac world, I invite you to check out a video from the True Crime channel about Scott Sampson, a murder from 1990. True Crime is spelled Truu, and one more time, the name of the victim was Scott Sampson. Particularly to people who live in New England or the northeastern portion of America. It's somewhat of a regional story. It's actually the second oldest cold case in the history of the state of Maine, but of course trying to raise some awareness to that case, and overall I think the presenter of the True Crime channel did a very good job on that video. One more time, the name of the victim was Scott Sampson, and when I searched for just True Crime, Truucri, I didn't get a direct link to the channel. If you search True Crime Scott Sampson, you will find the video. And I invited the host of that channel to be on BlackBoxOnlineRadio as a guest, but she said that she is purely anonymous and she does not want to do any on-camera interviews, which is totally fine by me. So I decided to share her channel and recommend that video to you guys. But I also want to talk about a set of videos that are made about the Zodiac Killer on Ray Grant's YouTube channel. Now, Ray Grant was a longtime friend of Black Box Online Radio. I've said some praiseworthy things about his book, Zodiac Killer Solved, and also Ray Grant has been a very big supporter of not only the channel, but also of me. And somebody sent me some sections of one of his recent videos, the times when he was discussing Black Box Online Radio and me as a presenter, and I'm going to play them for you in just a second. But Ray Grant has chosen to disassociate himself from this channel. If by chance this is the first episode that you've clicked on from Black Box Online Radio, I'll just share that Ray Grant has a different type of Zodiac Killer theory out there, and that is that there were 4 participants who planned the Zodiac murders in 1968 and 69. But his theory actually goes back to 1966, when the first murder in his mind that was planned was done by the 4 Zodiacs, and that is the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. And it went all the way until 1981 with the murder of Joan Webster in the Boston area. Joan Webster was abducted from Logan Airport in Boston, Massachusetts, and her remains were found in Hamilton, Massachusetts in 1990. Now, Ray Grant was, again, a longtime friend and supporter of this show. He's been a guest on this program, and we were planning on doing more episodes, one about Ted Bundy, because Ray Grant has an upcoming book about Ted Bundy called Ted Bundy Deconstructed, and also to talk about the murder of Joan Webster. He believes that that is a Zodiac murder, but not a lot of people are in agreement with him. And I was looking forward to that one because I've talked a lot about the murder of Joan Webster here on this channel. In 2021, I did a regular series where I discussed the murder of Joan Webster. It came out every Saturday for several months. But ultimately, Ray Grant chose to disassociate from Black Box Online Radio because somebody had made an accusation of plagiarism. They accused Ray Grant of plagiarizing Gareth Penn's book, Time 17. And there were some exchanges that went on in a thread, and he contacted me privately and asked if I would delete the comment that accused him of plagiarism, delete the thread, and ban the user. And I said that I would delete the comment, but I chose not to ban the user who accused him of plagiarism for the following reason, and that is that I mostly reserve blocking and banning users because of actions such as making threats, insulting people's family members, spam and harassment. Like, even if someone is just posting the same message over and over again, and that does happen from time to time. I mean, also if people are trying to link into something for profit that is unrelated to a discussion of the video, like purely automated spam messages, those things get removed, banned, and blocked. And I even forgot to mention one when I was discussing this with Ray Grant. Insulting murder victims. I've had to remove people from the channel for that. That is just something that I absolutely do not want in the comments section. And, if someone's been murdered and then someone decides to insult their moral character and say, well, they deserve to be murdered because they don't like the choices that that person made in their life. And I just don't want to see that in the comment section on my channel. But I'm going to play a set of video clips because multiple people have asked me about Ray Grant's comments about me, and one person shared these sections of his video because they said he was being extremely disrespectful toward me. And first I'm going to play them, and then we'll have a response.
By the way, I'm not going to appear on Ned's channel anymore, okay? Because a guy posted last night, Ray Grant, you don't even have an original idea of your own. You take someone else's work and add a couple of crazy ideas to it and call it yours. Where would you be without the book times 17? Well, like 200 people in Greater Boston would be dead if I didn't have that. But beyond, what's funny about that is, because I gave my copies of Times 17 to one police agency and one of the I think Liberty Mutual. I'm not sure where I had two copies. I'm not sure where they went, but I think I eventually got copies off of. Then they can post on other sections of the board saying, "Hey, Ray Grant is denying us our constitutional rights." And what I would say about Ned DeHaan is that I understand the reluctance to ban people who are just like heckling people, and I get tired of people. It's almost like I'm embarrassed for them, because they'll keep posting stuff like, well, your ideas are crazy, and they're just crazy, and it's one crazy after idea after another, and they never say why this idea or that idea is crazy and what's so crazy about it. And what I hope is, if you've been looking at my videos, that it will explain why I think what I think. I don't think there's anything crazy about the reference to, for example, the Vallejo police report. I think it is a genuine mystery that page has been blanked out. And again, I think it backs up what I say about the cipher grid having been altered. So as I said, I understand where Ned is coming from. However, you have to pick your spots, and you have to decide what's important to you. If it is important to Ned DeHaan to defend the honor of anonymous posters who are acting like 3-year-olds on his message board, that's fine. I can understand the reluctance to ban someone. I do not understand the reluctance to simply erase that sort of thread, particularly from someone who's providing content to you. So maybe the poster in question can go on Ned's, well, he's anonymous, so he's not going to do that, but he can go on Ned's channel and do an hour on Ted Bundy, or do an hour on Joan Webster, which I was going to do on Thanksgiving, but now I have the day free now because I'm not going to do it. Sometimes people have to learn their lessons the hard way, so. Keep in mind that the reason that Drewzer's video over on the Zodiac Killer Expert series, now it should be called Zodiac Killer Hobbyist series, I think, with Drewzer on there. But interviews with the hobbyist. Here's our first interview with the hobbyist. It's Andrew Gray. Anyway, see, I'm just jealous because my Lake Herman Road video has been the most successful, and it's almost got 1,000 views. And I think Drewzer got like 1,000 views in his first 24-hour period. But the only reason Drewzer is even on there is that I donated 200 pounds, which is $259, to the Zodiac Killer channel so that they would upload those two videos, one of which is the Druser video, and I think the other one is, if I may be wrong. I was wrong about the Druser video, what that was. So I don't know what the other video is, but I think it's, and then the Druser video is from 2 years ago. I believe the other video is Richard Grinnell interviewing Ned DeHaan, okay? And basically interviewing him about, where he came from, what he's doing, and so forth. And it's again, it's unfortunate that I'm not going to be doing videos with Ned, and I'm not going to be looking at his channel or anything. But it's. By the way, if you're Ned DeHaan and you see a poster calling Ray Grant crazy, wouldn't you immediately ban that person? I mean, look, I contributed to Ned's channel. I bought him coffees. Same thing with Tom. I've been buying Tom coffee since 2010. But I've been buying Ned coffees. And I bought him 2 videos from Steve Beaumont, okay? So, I mean, you see somebody calling your friend crazy, don't you ban that person immediately? Say, get the hell out of my house, but no, okay? So...
And one more time, those were clips from Ray Grant's YouTube channel, and you can find his channel by searching Ray Grant Zodiac. I think that's the easiest way to do it. Now, I want to be extremely clear about something. I don't have bad blood toward Ray Grant. I thank him for all of his support in the past. I would work with him again in the future. If he comes around, I would talk to him again. He's welcome to listen to my channel. But I think I was pretty clear prior to playing those clips about more or less how I moderate the comment section here on Black Box Online Radio. And someone said, hey, he's being very disrespectful about you, Ned DeHaan. And overall, I would say that isn't really disrespectful to me as much as it is to Druser, to Andrew Gray, who is the most recent guest on the Zodiac Killer channel, saying more or less that you should change the name to Interview with the Hobbyists instead of Interviews with the Experts. And I mean, that is the person whom he truly insulted in that set of video clips there. And I also need to be clear about some things. As most of you guys know, I am the host of the Zodiac Killer channel's Interview with the Experts series. And what Ray Grant is talking about is there was a very long hiatus between the release of the last video with Richard Grinnell and the most recent video that featured Andrew Gray, who's also known as Druser. But if you look at the thumbnail of Druser's episode, it is listed as a bonus episode. And even in the interview that I did with Andrew Gray, he states that he is not a Zodiac expert. And it is true that there was an interview that was recorded with Richard Grinnell where Richard Grinnell interviews me. That is true. That one has not been released yet. And I am also not a Zodiac expert. Those were bonus episodes. Original plan for that series, which started in 2021, was to have 21 episodes. And the final 3 episodes were supposed to be bonus episodes. And we recorded around a dozen of them, but we didn't make it to the full 21. And there were 3 episodes that were supposed to be done as bonus episodes. One of them was the Druser interview, because we wanted to have an interview with a close follower of the Zodiac mystery who was not a published author, who didn't have his own podcast, and also wasn't somebody who had their own brand in the Zodiac world, so to speak, the webmaster of a website, like Richard Grinnell, for example. And Druser was the person that was selected for that. There were a couple of other names that I had proposed, but they chose to interview Druser. Again, that was a bonus episode, talking to someone from a different background. And as far as me, Richard Grinnell interviewed me because I was the host of the program. Again, total bonus episode, just now right, the tables have turned. Now a former guest is interviewing the host. That was supposed to be episode 20. And then episode 21 was actually a 6-person round table. I kind of narrowed it down to 5 in my own mind, and I don't make all the creative decisions over there, but Do you know how hard it is to find 6 people who are Zodiac researchers that do not hate each other? Do you know how difficult that is? Phew. I was able to get it down to 5, and it took a lot of work, a lot of mental rearranging. And I was actually able to create a list of 5 people that I thought didn't completely hate each other's guts. But that episode has never been recorded, and I would have totally reached out to a bunch of people and tried to set that up. And why? I'm not sure. I'm not truly certain. The Zodiac Killer interview with the Expert series was actually building up a lot of steam, and it had some good momentum in 2021. And I don't run that channel. I am just the host. I am just the narrator of some of the other videos. I don't have any ownership of it, and I don't control the creative decisions. I just told you that I had proposed some people as a possible bonus episode guest, and my ideas were not used. I don't know why that didn't happen. I'm sitting here and I'm ready and waiting for more, always willing to do more interviews with the Zodiac Killer channel. But about Ray Grant paying money to the Zodiac Killer channel, he did say that in those clips you heard there. That is all true. There were 3 episodes that have been recorded, and he paid Steve Beaumont, I guess, £200 to release 2 of them. And the reason why the interview with Richard Grinnell and myself has not been released is there was an issue with part of the audio file, and that segment needs to be re-recorded. And once we do that, then I'm sure Steve from the Zodiac Killer channel will release the interview. But I also need to be clear about something. I do not get any money from that. Ray Grant has been a very generous supporter of BlackBoxOnlineRadio, one of the largest contributors on BuyMeACoffee.com, but I don't get any money from the Zodiac Killer channel's interview with the Expert series. I mean, he paid £200, which I guess is like, what is that, 250 US dollars or something? That's not going to me. That is going to somebody else. And I never expected to get money for that series when I signed on. It was just a project that was proposed to me, and I said yes, absolutely. I'm saying yes, absolutely now. I want to do more interviews for that series. I want to I haven't even done the re-record yet with Richard Grinnell. I'm just always sitting here waiting for more from the Zodiac Killer channel, particularly the interview series, because that is something that I think really connected with a lot of people in the audience, and there was some very good feedback, and a lot of people just liked hearing the different perspectives from the guests. And Ray Grant was contacted to do the interview with the Expert series in 2021, but he was not able to do so because he has a condition that affects his voice, and he wasn't able to do it at the time. And he talks about that a lot on his YouTube channel, so I won't share any more of his personal details. But I don't have any bad blood toward Ray Grant. And I think that someone maybe hit the nail on the head when they wrote this out in the comment section, that he's from a different generation than I am, who doesn't necessarily deal with chaotic free speech in the comment section. And I told you that I'm not some type of absolutist. I do remove people from the comment section all the time, but for heckling, I mean, for calling somebody out, or making a bogus accusation, or just trash talking, that usually doesn't warrant banning a user from the channel. And I don't think that it's would set a good standard to remove everybody who accuses somebody of plagiarism. And more importantly, the way that I would have dealt with that is, if somebody accused me of plagiarism and I didn't plagiarize anyone, I would just say, no, I didn't do that. You're wrong, and here's why. Maybe provide a 1 or 2 sentence explanation. Now, not everybody has to deal with things the way that I do, but more or less, that is, I think, a much simpler answer than demanding that someone be removed from a YouTube channel that isn't yours, and when that didn't happen, say, well, then I'm never going to do anything with you ever again in the future. But that's just my take on the subject. However, I still watch Ray Grant's videos. I particularly like the one he did on the Terminus Triangle, and also the episode that he has done on Michael O'Hare as a Zodiac Killer suspect. I've liked that one. And you see, I'm really looking toward Ray Grant's videos for a different perspective on things, even if he isn't exactly being very warm and fuzzy toward other people, because he has followed these true crime stories for 35, maybe 38 years, and he's very good at analyzing the facts of the case. And I particularly like how he talks about conceptual art. He was the first person that I ever found who talked about the conceptual art angle with the Zodiac Killer mystery, and I take recommendations from him all the time. He says you have to look at the story of the artist Christo and his wife Jeanne-Claude. Christo is a Bulgarian-American artist, and Jeanne-Claude was his wife, a French-American artist, and they were all about conceptual art. And there are some pieces of info that are available on YouTube. There's an HBO documentary that talks about their plan, The Gates of Central Park, where they say very clearly they wanted to put gates with saffron fabric in Central Park. They had thousands of them, and it was only up for 16 days, but it took 25 years to get it approved. And they talk about how the process is part of the art form, like going through City Hall and trying to obtain permits. All of that is part of the art form. And there's an HBO documentary that's more than an hour long, but I really found that if you truly want just the nutshell version, there's a video about the gates in Central Park on Robbie Ahmed's channel, Robbie Ahmed, Ahmed, and that just will more or less give you the short version. And with Christo and Jeanne-Claude, they also focus on how their projects are about aesthetic improvements as opposed to deep philosophical meaning, and more or less tying into the conceptual art angle that it's about the stages that they go through to add in these things like gates with saffron fabric in Central Park. It's about altering the way that something looks and the steps that they have to do to improve that. And I believe Christo and Jeanne-Claude have both passed away now, but there is a lot of info about this. There's even a book that discusses this on Amazon.com. But I'm going to be looking at some other things that Ray Grant has recommended from his YouTube channel, and I would work with him again in the future. I would talk to him again in the future, and I have no problem against him. I mean, I told you I completely disagree with the way he chose to talk to Andrew Gray, or talk about Andrew Gray rather, stating that, I mean, he is not an expert and we should change the name of the series to Interviews with the Hobbyist. Well, maybe Andrew wouldn't even be offended by that, because he said during the interview that he was not an expert. I'm not an expert, and those are just some kind of supplements to the larger series. But a lot of people have been critical of that name, and I don't even want to get overly bogged down on that. And if anything gets back to Ray Grant, no hard feelings. But as for this channel, if you do want to support Black Box Online Radio, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out BBOR, and you can also go through some of the links in the description box. What Ray Grant was talking about was BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNet88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. And as far as other stories in the Zodiac world go, I also want to thank Sandy Betts for talking to me about her Zodiac story, and I want to thank all of you guys in the comments section for recommending a channel called Mindshock. When I did my episode on JonBenet Ramsey for the live stream that comes out on Thursdays, a lot of you were saying, hey Ned, you got to check out Mindshock's presentation on the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, and I have not done that one yet, but the episode that I did watch was the 3-hour presentation on Sandy Betts' Zodiac story, and I'll get to the JonBenet Ramsey episode rather soon. But the big issue that people have is that Sandy Betts is someone who lived through the Zodiac crimes and into the years following, and they think that she is telling a bunch of stories about how she might have connections to Zodiac killer suspects, to Zodiac killer victims, that she knew a lot of people in California that we discuss frequently in the Zodiac killer world. And some people think that her stories are just too outrageous. And one person seems to be the presenter of Mindshock who did call her out on that. And somebody else brought this to my attention on one of the live streams that I do on Thursdays by saying that Sandy Betts just says that a bunch of men were stalking her. She has so many men who are coming after her and stalking her and leaving these bizarre clues that could be related to the Zodiac killer story. It's almost just too outrageous to be true. And what Sandy had written to me was, she said, there's this channel out there called Mindshock that did a 3-hour presentation on my Zodiac killer story, but they seem to be under the misapprehension that I had a bunch of stalkers, that there were numerous men who have been stalking me, and I don't claim that. And I was like, well, how many men would you say were stalking you in your lifetime or in the story that's relevant to the Zodiac mystery? And she said, two. There were only two men that she ever accuses of stalking her. And I was like, okay, well, who are they? And she said their names were Honcho and Billy. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. The last time we talked about this, you told me the stalker's name was Tony. And she's like, yeah, Honcho was a nickname for Tony. And I was like, aha, now I get it. This could be the source for everything. Sometimes he's referring to these two men by different names. And that seems like one of the reasons why people would think there is a bunch of men who have been stalking her. And if you do watch the episode on Mindshock about Sandy Betts, it's pretty good. It starts out tightly focused, and then it goes into a bunch of other suspects and different subjects altogether. I mean, there was a fascinating discussion on the Pittsburgh serial killer, Pittsburgh, California, not Pennsylvania, but Pittsburgh, California, and a set of homicides that took place in the 1990s. I absolutely don't think it was related to the Zodiac Killer at all. And it goes into the category of, okay, I mean, I think this is very valuable stuff. I'm going to come back to it later, but it's not within the actual context of the presentation and the episode at hand for the current moment. But as far as Sandy Betts' story goes, I think the absolute most valuable question that Sandy Betts has is, what happened to the Lake Berryessa costume? Because Sandy provides. On September 27th of 1969, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were attacked at Lake Berryessa. The Zodiac Killer was wearing a hooded costume that had clip-on sunglasses. It had almost a rectangular top that was what people call the hooded costume. It had fabric that went down, and it had a Zodiac symbol, or a circle with a cross going through it, that was sewn on to the front part of the costume. Now, Sandy Betts is someone who believes that she knows what happened to the Zodiac Killer's hood from Lake Berryessa, that one of her stalkers put it into her car, and she found it in her car. And that was the stuff that I wanted to talk to her about more than anything, because, I mean, what happened to the Zodiac Killer's Lake Berryessa costume? It was discarded in someone's car. He committed the murder, then dumped it on a woman that he had been following for a while. I never would have guessed that in a million years. I was always under the impression and mindset that the Zodiac would have held on to that as a guarded treasure. I mean, put it in some type of lockbox because he's committed this murder, and he's not even necessarily bragging about it so much in the letters, although the Zodiac did make a phone call after the Lake Berryessa stabbing. But Sandy Betts says that the hood was left in her car, and she didn't know about the description of the killer at Lake Berryessa's costume until well after that. So the hood was actually made in two parts, and one part of it was discarded. The other part is still held in storage somewhere. But she had this description of the costume that I had never heard before as well, and that is that the reason why there's this rectangular top to the hooded costume is because it was actually a paper bag. So many people have joked about this, so many people have made comments about this, and they've said that the Zodiac Killer's hooded costume at Lake Berryessa looks like a paper shopping bag that was just either black or painted black. Most likely it was black originally. I mean, you can buy black gift bags and so on. They're not that hard to find. But Sandy Betts actually believes that the top portion was made out of paper, and then it was connected to a piece of cloth that was the lower portion of the costume. As previously stated, the costume was in two parts. One was paper and one was cloth. And the cloth was not originally black, because it was dyed with a particular material, or a particular substance was used to make the color black or darker in some ways. And I was like, what do you mean, like spray paint? And she says, no, I don't think so about spray paint, because spray paint wouldn't necessarily leave the smell behind after it had dried. She actually thinks that it was dyed with shoe polish, and like it was colored with shoe polish, and that's why it was darker. Now she says that the hood still exists in her possession somewhere. It's in a storage box in somebody else's house, and I'm not even going to say anything else about that. But we'll have to discuss that when Sandy Betts comes on the channel, and I'm hoping that she's going to be a future guest here on Black Box Online Radio. She's still talking with some other people about interviews, and she has released a book this year called The Zodiac Killer Guide 2023. And so, when she has time, she's going to come on Black Box Online Radio, and hopefully we will sort out all of these details. But that could be something very telling, because when she saw the hood, she just thought it was a Halloween costume. September 27th, it's definitely in Halloween season. I mean, some people get ready for Halloween in August, and some people just celebrate year-round and so on. But she thought it was a Halloween costume, so she discarded the paper bag, and she wanted to be very clear about it, that it was indeed made of paper. But there were spots on it that she thought were mud, and now she thinks that it was the blood of Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. And I'm like, well, you have this hood. I mean, DNA testing could be an answer to this, because Brian Hartnell's still alive, and even if he's not, people would definitely have his DNA, and if his blood is on there. And she says she doesn't think that the DNA would have been damaged, and there could be a possible way to do some DNA check. But I want to be clear, I have a certain amount of skepticism in regards to Sandy Betts' story. Not because I don't believe her, but, I mean, just because she found a hooded costume in her car, I mean, and she didn't know that it was the Zodiac's hood at the time, is there any possibility that it was a different type of costume? Let's say maybe she did have a stalker that left a Halloween costume in the car or something like that. And to be clear, it's a Halloween costume, and there is a dictionary and I think one other item that was left in her car, and the dictionary will come up in a different story. But I mean, without being able to examine this firsthand, or at least just see photos of it, was that really the Zodiac Killer's hood? And I also think it's extremely bizarre that the Zodiac would commit the murders of Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, and then discard the Lake Berryessa costume in the car of a woman that he was infatuated with. But, I mean, killers don't play by the rules, they break them. That just, to me, is a little bit far out there, but if that's what happened, that's what happened. And this really falls into the story of Sandy Betts. Mindshock was talking about this nonstop, saying, whoa, now wait a second. I mean, she's telling all of these stories about she knew so-and-so, this event happened, and they're like casting doubt, well, why weren't these things more reported in the papers and so on? My answer was, well, I don't know, I wasn't a newspaper writer back in 1969 or the early 1970s, but Sandy Betts was once at Lake Berryessa for the filming of a movie with Burt Reynolds, and she has a photo of her and Burt Reynolds, and she told the story about how Burt Reynolds picked her up and lifted her off the ground. And even the Mindshock person was doubting that one for a while. They're like, okay, well, she has a photo of Burt Reynolds. I think that portion of the story is true. And I was just thinking, even if it's not, why would you doubt somebody about that? Why would you doubt somebody about meeting Burt Reynolds? Someone's on a movie set in California, or they're on location in California for the filming of a movie, and Burt Reynolds was one of the actors in it, and they met Burt Reynolds one time. I mean, what is so outrageous about that? It's not. I mean, that is one of the most benign, most plausible, and just easy to digest aspects of the story. Okay, someone was filming a movie. Sandy Betts was an extra in the film, and she met Burt Reynolds, and she wasn't even starstruck by him because he wasn't that famous at the time. That's not too far beyond belief. Now, the Zodiac hood from Lake Berryessa, maybe, but that is a very difficult thing to accept. At the same time, I do not believe that anyone has ever convincingly come forward and said that they found the Lake Berryessa costume. I absolutely do not believe Dennis Kaufman when he said he found the Lake Berryessa hood in a piece of audio equipment. He's the guy that brought Jack Torrance forward as a Zodiac suspect. And I just want to share this challenge question with you guys. Do you believe that there is any chance that the Zodiac Killer's Lake Berryessa hood was made out of paper? Again, two parts. Paper that was secure to fabric that had been dyed with a substance maybe like shoe polish. Do you think that that is possible? please put your ideas in the comments section down below. And I also want to remind you guys that this episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Capital One. If you sign up for the Capital One Quicksilver card, you will get a $200 sign-on bonus. I've done this before. It's real. It's like getting free money handed to you. There will be a link posted in the description box, as well as one pinned down with the quick reference. If you don't have a Capital One card yet, please consider signing up for the Capital One Quicksilver. And one more announcement, and that is that this week there will be a return of Ripper Wednesday, and this week might turn into a double event, because I also do live streams on Thursdays. So, firstly, I just invite you guys to tune in for Ripper Wednesday. I will be releasing my first ever Jack the Ripper interview, and I'm going to be in touch with more people. But really, for the Tuesday and Wednesday shows, they're going to be covering true crime stories all across the spectrum, and people are contacting me asking to be guests on the shows, and I'm reaching out to other people. So all types of true crime interviews will be coming out on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. You can also go over to the playlist on the channel. Not only can you find true crime stories, but also Killer on a White Horse, A Story of the Evening Watchman, is the book that I have written, and I'm releasing it in audiobook form. And in 2 weeks, there will be the conclusion of Killer on a White Horse, the audiobook. And I'm somebody who wrote the book. Well, I am the person who wrote the book. Wow, I should have rephrased that differently. I should have phrased that differently. Why are words so difficult? But anyway, I'm openly asking you guys not to get the paperback version, not to get the Kindle version. If you are curious at all about the story, feel free to listen to it here on Black Box Online Radio for free. And I will also be making an audiobook for my second set of stories, Down the Dark Lane, 3 Thrillers from a Motel. Lots of things to look out for on Black Box Online Radio. Please like and subscribe. And now, for something completely different, I would like to talk about an upcoming interview that will be available here on Black Box Online Radio. This weekend, there will not be a portion of the audiobook release because, as I said, I have a lot of true crime interviews that have been done, and I'm going to be releasing a 2-part interview with Adam Ivester. Adam Ivester is the owner of the YouTube channel Real Zodiac Killer Reveal 2023. He's been a guest on this program before, but as another previous guest stated, Mike Rodelli, he made the comment that perhaps you should have previous guests invited back to answer challenges from the listeners, like people's comments in the comment section can be read off as challenges, and Adam did that, and I'm going to go through one of them right now. I'm going to play a clip for you guys. It's about 8 minutes long, and I want to know what you guys think. And this relates to Adam's solution to the Z13 cipher. The Zodiac Killer was not only a serial killer, he also mailed ciphers and cryptograms, and this one, the Z13, was the third one that was mailed. The fourth one was the Z32. The Zodiac Killer's first 2 ciphers have been solved, the Z408 and the Z340. The Z13 and the Z32 have not yet been solved. I'm going to play this clip, and then we'll do a response. This interview segment on Black Box Online Radio has been made possible by Wheat. You can visit wheat.co for recording technology.
I can hear.
I can hear you now. We lost you for a second.
Yeah, I'm back.
Did you hear me?
No, I didn't. Go ahead, repeat me.
I said that I have a challenge question for you, and this is my own question, not
Go
from the
ahead.
comment section, but it relates to your solution to the Z13 cipher. But before I ask it,
Right.
I would like to introduce the solution to the Z13 cipher, just in case anyone has not heard it previously.
Well, Ned, when I first started this, I thought the Z13 solution I had, and by the way, I've got actual people commenting on my channel about ciphers that don't even know what the hell a cipher is. Because I told them, I said, John, I made the comment that John Parx does fit into the Z13 solution because par has RR, so there should be 2 symbols back to back. Well, this one young man who I got nothing against him, but I don't know why anyone would comment on something they don't even understand. He said he apparently thinks that a cipher is letters that you put into different symbols, and so long as there's John Parx has 11 letters and Z13 has 13 symbols, that he said, oh, John Parx does fit into the Z13. And I'm thinking, you don't even know what the hell it is, and you're going to comment on it? Why? But you can go read that comment.
Why is he wrong? Like, only because of 11 to 13? It's like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean exactly?
A cipher is something that, let's say, you've got John Parx is just it. Let's say it's Z11 instead of Z13. He did John JOHN PARRCOX. If that's the case, par would have to have RR at the end. A par, so it would have to be whatever symbol it would be. Let's say it would be a 8-ball. It'd have to be 8-ball, 8-ball. You know what I mean? It'd have to be a back-to-back symbol for John Parx to fit into the Z13 solution, right? You understand?
Well, yes, but does Zodiac do that all the time?
No, the Z13 solution does not have a back-to-back, like RR is back-to-back, one right at the other side by side. It doesn't have a back-to-back symbol. So the Z13 cryptogram is AEN, Zodiac symbol, 8-ball, K, 8-ball, M, 8-ball, anchor, NAM. Okay. There's the 8-balls are almost back-to-back, but for John Parx to fit in there, it would have to be RR would have to be, it'd have to be like 8-ball, right? One right after the other, right?
No. You could scramble.
What do you mean?
Scramble. Rearrange the letters.
See, that's called an anagram. That's not a cipher.
Well,
cipher.
Who says the Zodiac has to play by the rules or something? I mean, the solution to the cipher could be an anagram. Well, but it's not even like an anagram has to make a new word, right? Like I'm trying to think. The word bat is you can rearrange the letters to get the word tab. That would be an anagram. This is a scrambled solution, and you just said that there are two A's there. Right? You just read off the Z13. There are two A's. If you were to scramble that, then I mean, how is this guy?
Because I'm presuming that it's a simple cipher solution, and that it's for a simple cipher solution to happen, you've got to go in sequential order. Like you're dialing your phone number or it's your social security number. It has to be sequential because there's rules to ciphers. You can't just make a bunch of stuff up and just slap the word cipher on it. That's nonsense.
Criminal.
Yeah, but see, Zodiac, all of his if that were the case, we would never figure out any of his ciphers. But just like the alphabet starts with A and ends with Z, there's rules to it, and like mathematics has rules like additions, 2 + 2. There's principles and there's rules to it. Ciphers have very strict rules, and the NSA has said if the Z13 solution has to be a simple cipher solution.
No, it
because
doesn't.
Let me finish. Because if it's the more complicated version, like the Z340 and 408, where different symbols can take on multiple, an A, for example, can be several different symbols. That more complicated version is too short of a cipher to be. It would never be figured out ever in a million years. So for something so short, no, it can't be. He could have made it the more complicated version, but the NSA has said for a 13-character cipher, if anybody's going to do it, he could have layered it so complicated that nobody would ever figure it out. Sure, and all his other ciphers are not simple cipher solutions. But my solution is a simple cipher solution, which they said is the only way, as Snowball's Chancing Hill, you're ever going to figure this thing out is as a simple cipher solution. And a simple cipher solution, you have to have each letter represents each symbol represents a letter and only one letter, and that's it. And the X is at the beginning. The A's are X's. The E is a J. The N are O's, two O's. The 8 balls are spaces. The K is a P. And like I said, the 8 ball, another space right there. And then you got 2 dots right there on the M's. Those are 2 dots. So it's legible. My Z13 solution is the only legible solution, a simple cipher solution that's actually legible, that makes any sense at all to the suspect. There's no other Z13 solution that is a simple cipher solution that's even remotely legible.
I had a completely different question for you, but I still think we need to come back to this. The guy who challenged you, I don't think he's wrong when, he said that, he's actually trying to help you, saying that John Parx can be found in the Z13.
It's impossible. You gotta understand that. You gotta understand what a simple cipher solution is.
It doesn't have to be a simple cipher solution.
No, it does have to be, because there's only 13 characters.
And one more time, those were the words of Adam Ivester from Real Zodiac Killer Revealed 2023. And one of the reasons why I wanted to use this interview segment here was because I wanted you guys to see some visuals as opposed to just the two of us talking and just looking at the people on the screen. So what I was sharing with him was, when he said that it is not a possible solution to get the name John Parx from the Z13 cipher, this is what I meant. And I did not preview the other person's solution who told him that it was possible, but there are the 3 8s using Adam's own method. Those are the spaces. The X counts as the signature line. Like when you look at a contract or a document that needs a signature, there's often an X and then there's a line. So X, John Parx, and then the spaces are in there accordingly. Now, you guys can see this solution on the screen. Can you tell me if there's anything that is wrong with this, that the numeric values, or the symbols are not matching up to the corresponding letters? Now, it would be all out of whack, and you would have to unscramble the solution. But this isn't calculus or trigonometry or rocket science or something. It's just the cipher has a solution, it has a message, and that the letters of that message are just rearranged in a different order. And I was getting a little bit heated about it in the interview because I think that I was just so surprised that Adam was saying that it was either impossible or, he did acknowledge it. The Zodiac could have done it that way. But to think that it was such an implausible choice for somebody to do that, people have proposed a scrambled solution to the Z13 all the time when they're like, all right, well, firstly, you have to know what letter corresponds to each symbol, and then you have to rearrange the symbols to get the name. And I don't necessarily think that it's completely out of line or that it's completely ridiculous that someone would choose to do that. But now that I actually got to calm down a little bit and thinking about it a little bit more, I can comprehend what he's saying about how you wouldn't know which letters represent which symbols, or if you can unscramble the solution, then the letters that repeat would not necessarily have the same place value. Maybe I'm being too generous here because he didn't actually say these words, but when I was trying to solve the Z13 and get the name John Parx, it took me about 20 minutes. But feel free to challenge me on this as well. The symbols that are used multiple times in the Z13, like the A and the N and the M, those almost have an interchangeable value. Like you could just as easily say that the letter A represents X, and you could also say that the letter A represents R if you're unscrambling them. And you'd need a certain amount of symbols that repeat. Then you could just rearrange them in any way. You wouldn't necessarily know that the letter A represented a specific symbol, or the symbol A represents a specific letter. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but they're almost interchangeable. You could just as easily say that A represents this symbol that is used twice, A represents this one that's used twice. Now the 3 8s, if we're going to assign place value to the circled 8s, they would have to have the same one. If you're going to say that the 8s are spaces, then you'd have to have the 8s as spaces. They have to be 3 spaces because there are no letters there are no other symbols that are used 3 times. The circled 8 has to have one precise meaning. Now, some of the other ones, maybe they're a little more interchangeable. And ultimately, I guess I can comprehend about how that would create a much larger amount of possibilities and you wouldn't be able to solve it without the key, but the Z13 has never been solved to everybody's satisfaction, the way that the 408 and the Z340 have been solved. But what do you guys think? Who do you side with? And please share your feedback on our discussion about the Z13 in here, and please look out for the full interview that will come out on Sunday with Adam from Real Zodiac Killer Revealed, talking about his Zodiac suspect, John Parx. And right now I would like to get to your supporter shoutouts from BuyMeACoffee.com. As previously stated, anybody who supports Black Box Online Radio at BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88 will get a shoutout on Zodiac Monday. Our first shoutout goes to Batman66. Thank you so much for your regular and consistent support. And the next one comes to us from River Prawn Pottery. Thank you again for also being a consistent supporter. And the next one is from Floyd Black 53, buymeacoffee.com, and it has a message saying, "You rock. I've watched your channel grow, and it does because you are the very soul of BBOR. Thank you. Ned, have a productive but relaxing holiday season." And yes, happy holidays to you too, and happy holidays to all the listeners of Black Box Online Radio. Thanksgiving is past, and we are now in the holiday season, so I really I'm looking forward to this one. This is actually going to be my first Christmas in the Philippines, so it's going to be a little bit different than Christmas in West Virginia, but we're still trying to celebrate and get festive even when it's extremely hot outside. But our next supporter from BuyMeACoffee.com is Sam Fisher, who's the author of The Zodiac Killer Identity, and his suspect is Joseph Paul Franklin. And there is an MSNBC documentary about Joseph Paul Franklin that was recently uploaded onto YouTube that Sam Fisher recommended to me as well, and I watched the first half. Immediately after this episode, I'm going to be watching the rest of it, and Sam Fisher has 2 small books out on the Zodiac Killer case, and one of them is called The Zodiac Killer Identity, and the other one is The Zodiac Revealed Joseph Paul Franklin, and Sam Fisher says, "Being weird is not a crime." Amazing, Sam. I love that. And the next one comes to us from Mr. Sean, and there is not a message here, but Mr. Sean, thank you so much. You're coming to us from New Zealand, right, Mr. Sean? And I'm a little bit closer to your time zone here in the Philippines. And once again, anybody who supports Black Box Online Radio at BuyMeACoffee.com will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. You can also use the super thanks on YouTube, and click the link from Capital One and sign up for the Capital One Quicksilver, and you'll get $200 as a sign-on bonus. But I would like to do something different. And this is from Anna Marie Ackerman, and this is on her website, AnnaMarieAckerman.com, and it talks about first Jack the Ripper, and I'm going to tie this into the Zodiac Killer. As previously stated, Ripper Wednesday will return this week on BBOR, and I'm going to read a section of text that was written by Anna Marie Ackerman, and then I will share something about the Zodiac Killer. The thing that scares me the most about Jack the Ripper is not the murders. Oh no. It's the number of suspects. The list of men accused of the world's most famous serial killing spree now far outstrips the number of victims, and fresh suspects appear every decade. With the publication of each new Ripper book comes totally convincing arguments that the newly introduced suspect could have murdered and mutilated at least 5 women in Whitechapel. That always leads me to find the lingering question. Were Victorian men really that depraved? Another question. Were there so many of them really capable of history's most famous serial killing spree? The answer suggested in Ripper literature frightened me more than the crimes, because collectively they say yes. With that right fodder, I'm opening a new historical true crime blog, Ripper Suspects. I don't really have a favorite candidate, and I won't advocate for one over the other. This category will present the suspects objectively. Now I'm going to read that same section of text for you, but I'm going to take out the word Ripper, and I'm going to insert the word Zodiac, and let's see what it sounds like. The thing that scares me most about the Zodiac killer case is not the murders. Oh no, it's the number of suspects. The list of men accused of the world's most famous serial killing spree far outstrips the number of victims and fresh suspects every decade. With the publication of each new Zodiac book comes totally convincing arguments that newly introduced suspects could have murdered and mutilated, well, let's just say murdered at least 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1888. That always leaves me with the lingering question, were Californian men really that depraved? And the next question, were there so many of them that were really capable of history's most famous serial killing spree? The answers suggested in Zodiac literature frighten me more than the crimes because collectively they say yes. With that ripe fodder, I'm opening a new historical crime law category, Zodiac suspects. I don't really have a favorite candidate and won't advocate for one over the other. This category will present the suspects objectively. According to me, that just could easily have been written about the Zodiac killer. And let's think about that for a second. 5 people were murdered by the Zodiac killer in 1968 or 69. Now, in Sandy Betts' book, whom I was discussing recently, her co-author Shannon Marin, she states that there could be all types of murders that go back to the murder of Ray Davis in 1962. Ray Grant, previously mentioned on this channel, also states that Zodiac crimes began in 1966, went to 1981, no matter what, even if it's John Cameron, who believes that the Zodiac killer murdered 660 people, I kid thee not, even if you look at his number, that does not compare to the number of suspects. 2,500 suspects, maybe 3,000 Zodiac killer suspects exist, and new ones pop up all the time. And we have to deal with the question from Anna Marie Ackerman. Were all of these men or women actually capable of the Zodiac murders, becoming a taunting serial killer? And then the answer, according to the people accusing them, is yes, all of them. And some people are just so utterly stunned and shocked. But what do you think about that when you hear that thing, that the true horror of the Zodiac world is not the murders, it's the number of suspects and how the list just keeps going, and how everybody just thinks that so-and-so was a serial killer. And on that notion, one suspect whom is not super widely discussed, but has been featured frequently here on Black Box Online Radio in the most previous statements, I think is a good tie-in, and his name is Shel Cavalle. He was the suspect we were discussing last Friday on the interview with Mike Rodelli, again, the person who came up with the idea of the challenges, like the episode is called Zodiac Killer Mike Rodelli Challenges the Haters, and he said that people should come back to defend themselves against comments that people are leaving in the section down below. I think it's a great idea, and I'm going to be doing more of those for Black Box Online Radio. But also, a lot of people think his Zodiac suspect, Shel Cavalle, simply wasn't capable of the murders. He was a wealthy businessman, and somebody even wrote in the comments section saying that Shel Cavalle was an adrenaline junkie. He was a speed junkie. He loved boat racing and horse racing, and he was a runner when he was younger. Those things don't necessarily appear in the Zodiac killer's set of crimes, definitely not in the crimes of 1968 and 69. Now, Rodelli would say something like, well, that means he would have been very familiar with the back roads of California because that's where he drove his cars. Sure, but about the comment pertaining to being an adrenaline junkie or a speed junkie, then this wouldn't necessarily be someone who is using any type of swiftness or speed or anything involving committing the murders. And what I think the person who left that comment was saying was, a speed junkie would be the kind of person who's just going to run people off the road in secluded areas or run people over when no one else is looking, run them over with his car. That would be more likely what you would expect from a speed junkie, rather than tying up the victims at Lake Berryessa and stabbing them calm and cool, although the Zodiac's hands were shaking at Lake Berryessa. But he definitely walked away without having too much hurry in his stride. And then Mike Rodelli has dealt with these questions all the time, and you can hear the full interview that I did with him where he responds to them. But Microdeli asked me something at the end of the interview that was not recorded, and that was, what did I think of the criminal profiler Richard Walter and his assessment of the Zodiac Killer? And I was like, well, I've heard you talk about him, but I wanted to try and find a list of his points that Richard Walter had written down. And what Microdeli informed me was Richard Walter didn't write down the profile for the Zodiac Killer. He simply shared it with him verbally. And I got online while I was still doing the call with Microdeli, and I found an article from New York Magazine which talks about Richard Walter openly calling him a fraud. And again, this is from New York Magazine. If anyone would like to read this, it came out in the spring of 2023. And Microdeli zones in on some very particular pieces of evidence with his Zodiac Killer suspect. Number one, the testimony of Lindsay Robbins, who saw the Zodiac Killer. And number two, Richard Walter's profile of the Zodiac Killer, because Richard Walter, as a psychological profiler, had the opinion and mindset that the Zodiac was a power-assertive serial killer, as opposed to a sexual sadist. Number two, the Zodiac was extremely well-organized in terms of his thoughtfulness and planning. And number three, that the Zodiac would have been an older elite individual, because let's just call Shel Cavalli an elite person. But the article that I was reading was talking all about how Richard Walter was a liar, a fraud, he misrepresented his credentials, he put fraudulent things on his resume, he misrepresented his achievements, he said that he was an adjunct lecturer at a university when he had really only spoken there one or two times. And they're calling him out on all these different types of things, talking about how this guy is making psychological profiles and assessments when he doesn't necessarily have the academic and work history credentials to back these things up. And my honest response is, I don't necessarily care if someone overinflated their resume. He said he was an adjunct lecturer and he only spoke at the college 2 times. That one's rather benign, and there are many other examples in the article from New York Magazine. But I brought this to Microdeli's attention, and what he shared with me was his psychological profile of the Zodiac Killer should stand on its own. His psychological profile of the Zodiac Killer, talking about how the Zodiac's a wealthy, elite, power-assertive serial killer who is very well organized mentally, those types of observations should stand on their own because they are things that people can evaluate on their own, and you don't need to read Richard Walter's work history. And another point that Microdeli brought up was Richard Walter has also conducted thousands of interviews with prisoners, and he definitely has experience in the world of psychological profiling. And psychological profiling is an art, not a science. It's not like it's some type of immediate go-to thing that'll just put things into your calculator and you'll get the result that you're looking for. But again, let's look at some of the claims in Richard Walter's psychological profile. Number one, the Zodiac's a wealthy, elite, power-assertive killer who is very well mentally organized. And I say that because what Richard Walter talked about was, he said that the Zodiac is the kind of person that would tape a pencil flashlight to a gun, and he referred to it as the gun barrel. This shows as someone who is making decisions that are practical, thought out, and also the Zodiac doesn't seem to be an extremely chaotic serial killer. He commits the Lake Herman Road murders and then drives away, or walks away, as some people believe, commits the Blue Rock Springs shooting and drives away, the Lake Berryessa stabbing, writes a message on the car door, and then walks away and disappears. Maybe he put the hood in Sandy Betts' car. But that all just goes to show that someone has been doing an enormous amount of mental planning. Now, the things that I think are the most valuable would be this concept of a power-assertive killer. Because another point that Richard Walter has made about the Zodiac is that the Zodiac was not a sexual sadist. And serial killers do not tend to go from being a power-assertive killer to a sexual sadist. And I am a natural skeptic, so I'm more or less on that side. When people accuse the Zodiac of being the Black Dahlia Avenger, or the Zodiac of being BTK, Dennis Rader, like the Dennis Rader and the Zodiac are the same person, or the Monster of Florence, whom I was discussing with Microdeli, because he's writing a book on that serial killer, those were all sexual sadists and torturers and I mean, the Monster of Florence, yeah, the Monster of Florence mutilated the pubic regions of the victims in a post-mortem way, but he definitely appears to be some type of sexually motivated serial killer. And according to Richard Walter, a serial killer is not normally going to go from being a power assertive killer to committing sexual mutilations. I agree completely. Simply based at looking at thousands of true crime cases on my own, and I don't seem to find that particular type of behavior repeating itself. Normally, someone's either the power assertive killer or they're the sexually motivated sadist, and I don't see a lot of overlap and so on. But what do you guys think? Should Richard Walter's credibility come into play when he is discussing the Zodiac killer mystery? To be fair, I don't necessarily think people should hire him for a job if he gets caught lying on his resume. If he got caught lying, that's one thing. But does that mean that everything he said about true crime cases was completely false? No, absolutely not. But that's just my take on the subject. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of Black Box Online Radio. Anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio at AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNerd88 over on Instagram. And I will see you over there. Goodbye.